The cold night air sliced through the vast expanse of the Silverdome in Pontiac, Michigan, on New Year's Eve, 1975. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, stood on stage, flanked by his daughter Lisa Marie and his wife, Linda. The crowd of 64,000 roared as the music began, but the chill of the arena and the pressure of the moment were almost too much to bear. Halfway through his performance, Elvis felt something snap. He looked down and saw that his pants had split, revealing a moment of vulnerability in front of a sea of eager fans. Despite the mishap, the Colonel was pleased. It was a massive payday, and for Elvis, it was another night of making magic, even if it came at a cost. Back in Memphis, Elvis had always enjoyed throwing New Year's Eve parties at local clubs, where soul singers and bands would entertain him and his guests. But this year, he was the main event, and the stakes were higher than ever. The money was pouring in, but the toll on his body and spirit was becoming more apparent. A few weeks later, Elvis and a group of friends, including Linda, Red, Patsy, Joe, Joan, and Jerry, flew to Vail, Colorado for a winter sports vacation. The air was crisp and the mountains were breathtaking, but Elvis didn't feel like skiing. Instead, he spent most of his time on a snowmobile, zipping around late at night. The trip was supposed to be a break, but even on vacation, the constant demands on Elvis were relentless. Jerry, exhausted by the non-stop activity, left early, and Elvis, feeling the weight of his responsibilities, ended up buying Cadillacs for the Denver cops who had accompanied them. The money gushed out of him like a broken dam, but the joy of the trip was already fading. Recording music, once a passion, had become a chore. In the early days, Elvis would arrive at sessions fully prepared, spending hours perfecting his interpretation of a song. He could switch from R&B to country to a gentle falsetto with ease, but by 1976, he was reluctant to step into a studio. When RCA couldn't get him to come to them, they brought a mobile recording truck to Graceland. The jungle room, usually filled with exotic decor, was stripped bare and turned into a makeshift studio. Elvis tried, but his old energy was gone. He warmed up with the Platters' Only You, a song he had sung at Sun Records, but the high notes that once soared were now out of reach. He was disappointed with himself, and it showed in his voice. Despite the challenges, Elvis managed to produce some hits. Moody Blue became a top 10 hit in the UK, and Hurt was a song he enjoyed performing live. But the best tracks like For the Heart and Danny Boy were a reminder of his changing voice. At 41, Elvis was now a baritone, and he struggled to hit the high notes he once owned. He even apologized on stage for not sounding as good as he used to, a rare moment of vulnerability for the king. The recording sessions at Graceland were sporadic, and on the last day, Elvis didn't come down from his bedroom at all. RCA had to piece together an album and a couple of singles as best they could. Within weeks, Elvis was back on the road, performing in cities across America. The money was still great, but the reviews were harsh. He forgot lyrics, had to sit out during some performances, and generally struggled to keep up. But the crowd still loved him, and he sang America the Beautiful with genuine emotion, especially in the bicentennial year. Elvis's life was a cycle of tours and recovery, with little time for anything else. The constant travel and performing were taking their toll, and he knew it. He had dreams of touring the world, but those dreams were fading. Instead of London, Paris, and Tokyo, he was stuck in a cycle of American cities, trying to keep up with the demands of fame. One day, Dr. Nick, a racquetball enthusiast, suggested that Elvis could make money by putting his name to a company that built racquetball courts. Elvis, always looking for new opportunities, signed up without much thought. But the project never took off, and by August 1976, he wanted out, fearing he might have to pay $1 million in losses. Vernon, his father, saw this as an opportunity to talk about Elvis's finances. The tours were bringing in money, but the costs of running Graceland and his lavish lifestyle were high. Vernon suggested it was time to make some budget cuts. The real blow came on August 13, 1976, when Vernon fired Red, Sonny West, and Dave Hebler, Elvis's longtime bodyguards and friends. They were given just 1 week's notice. For Red, who had been with Elvis for 20 years, it was a devastating blow. He tried to call Elvis, but the king made himself unavailable, hiding in a clinic in Las Vegas. Red and the others were left to deal with the fallout on their own, and rumors began to circulate that they were planning to write a book about their time with Elvis. Elvis, fearing what the book might reveal, tried to make amends. He offered them $50,000 each to cancel the book, but they refused. When he finally spoke to Red on the phone, it was a difficult conversation. Red had sold his house and everything he owned, and Elvis was surprised. They talked about the past, the good times and the bad, but the conversation was recorded, and excerpts were soon published in magazines and the book, Elvis, What Happened. Elvis felt betrayed, but he knew he had to keep moving forward. RCA needed more tracks for the new album, and as soon as he got back from a tour in South Dakota and Wisconsin, the mobile recording truck was back at Graceland, ready to capture whatever magic Elvis could still produce. Elvis's life in 1976 was a mix of music, money, and emotional turmoil. During a 2-night recording session, he recorded just 4 songs, each one reflecting his current musical interests and personal struggles. One of the songs, a ballad written by Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber, struck a nerve with him. It was about a man who left his family and couldn't return. Elvis sang it with deep emotion, admitting he got carried away easily and was an emotional son of a bitch. Despite the emotional impact, Elvis quickly lost interest and sent the musicians back to Los Angeles on his private plane. He even gave his white Lincoln to J.D. Sumner, the bass singer, to drive home. Elvis's generosity was well known, but it had become excessive. He needed to earn a lot of money to pay his staff debts and to keep giving things away. He never saved a penny and was stuck in a cycle of spending and giving, which kept him touring constantly. His manager, Tom Parker, played a big role in this cycle. Parker often booked more tours to keep the money flowing, even when Elvis's performances were poor. Parker would threaten to cancel everything if Elvis didn't pull himself together. But he never helped Elvis get the medical help he needed. Instead, he used the threat of losing everything to keep Elvis working. Elvis's personal life was also in chaos. His relationship with Linda was shaky. She often nagged him about other women, and he would deny it or apologize when caught. Despite this, he still saw other women. His friends would find and present him with new girls, and that's how he met Ginger Alden. Ginger was introduced to Elvis through her sister, Terry, by a friend named George Klein. Elvis watched them arrive on his closed-circuit TV and chose Ginger. He took her to his bedroom where they read books together, and he gave her a gold bracelet with diamonds. The next day, he took her to Las Vegas on his private jet. They stayed at the Hilton, and he called her mother to reassure her. The relationship with Linda ended when Elvis suggested she take a ride on his Jetstar, where Ginger was waiting. With Ginger by his side, Elvis's spirits and performances improved for a while, but he was needy and controlling. When Ginger wanted to go home for a break, he flew her parents out to stay with her instead. His mood swings were intense, and he often felt alone and desperate. He wrote notes to himself, asking for help from the Lord and expressing feelings of loneliness and loss. Elvis's health issues and weight gain meant he couldn't enjoy Christmas as he used to. He went back to work 2 days after Christmas, starting a 5-city tour that ended on New Year's Eve. Despite his health problems, he performed in 127 shows in 77 cities in 1976, showing the constant pressure he was under. Ginger was different from his previous girlfriends. She was young and wanted a normal life with friends and family. Elvis, however, wanted her all to himself. He showered her with gifts, but his behavior was often unpredictable and scary. He became angry when she refused to call her old boyfriend and even fired a bullet into the wall because she didn't bring him yogurt. He apologized, but the tension continued. When he was supposed to record in Nashville, he didn't show up because Ginger didn't want to go. He eventually arrived but refused to leave his motel, complaining of a sore throat. He flew back to Memphis and gave Ginger an engagement ring. The tension between them continued, and he had to fly her family to join the tour when she got homesick. Despite their relationship, Ginger wasn't mentioned in Elvis's will. He signed it in February with her as one of the witnesses, but only Lisa Marie and Vernon were listed as beneficiaries. Lisa Marie would inherit everything at 25, and Vernon was to take care of it until then. Elvis's life was a balancing act of music, money, and personal struggles, with each element affecting the others. His relationships, health, and professional life were all intertwined, creating a complex and often overwhelming situation. Elvis Presley's life in the summer of 1977 was a mix of pain and fleeting moments of happiness. He was a man struggling with his health, his career, and his personal relationships. Despite his fame, he felt alone and overwhelmed. After a grueling tour, Elvis was back at Graceland, his beloved home in Memphis. He spent most of his days in bed, watching television and reading. The once vibrant performer was now a shadow of his former self, weighed down by his struggles with drugs and his failing health. His body was swollen, and his movements were slow and clumsy. Even the most basic tasks felt like a challenge. Elvis's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. He worried about his upcoming tour, the rumors surrounding him, and the impending release of the book, Elvis, What Happened, which contained damaging allegations about his past. He also worried about his daughter, Lisa Marie, and what she would think of him when she grew up. The thought of her reading those stories about him made him feel sick. His closest friends, like Billy Smith and his wife Jo, were his main source of comfort. They listened to his fears and tried to reassure him. But even with their support, Elvis often felt lost. He was torn between his love for performing and his desire to escape the pressure of fame. He would tell them, "I'm just so tired of being Elvis Presley." Elvis found some solace in the small things. He looked forward to Lisa Marie's visits, which brought a sense of normalcy and joy to his life. He would call her often to plan her next stay and to ease his loneliness. He also found comfort in his faith, watching television evangelists and reading religious books. These moments of peace were rare, but they were important to him. Despite his physical and emotional struggles, Elvis still had moments of pride. He was pleased that his latest single, Way Down, was doing well on the charts, and he was glad that the Elvis Presley racquetball center problem had been resolved without too much damage. These small victories gave him a glimmer of hope. Elvis's relationship with his manager, Colonel Parker, was strained. They rarely spoke, and when they did, it was only about business. The Colonel's mysterious past and his reluctance to let Elvis tour internationally were sources of frustration. Elvis had heard rumors that the Colonel might not even be American, but he didn't have the energy to investigate further. He was more focused on his own problems. The days passed slowly, and Elvis often found himself lying in bed, lost in his thoughts. He smoked the occasional cigar and watched the 3 televisions in his room, reflecting on his life. He wondered about the future, and whether he could ever find the happiness and peace he craved. Graceland, once a sanctuary, sometimes felt more like a prison, a place where the past was celebrated but the present and future were uncertain. As the summer heat settled over Memphis, Elvis knew that he had to face his demons. He had a tour to prepare for and a life to live. But for now he was content to stay in his room, surrounded by the comforts of home, and dream of a better tomorrow. Lisa arrived on the last day of July, and right away, she was zipping around Graceland in her miniature electric golf cart. Elvis sometimes raced alongside her in another cart. Luckily, Ginger's elder brother had a little girl named Amber, who was about the same age as Lisa. The 2 girls became fast friends and spent their days playing together. Elvis hadn't thought about being a cowboy or riding horses in a while, but he surprised everyone by buying Lisa a pony from a cousin. He even walked the pony into the house to show Grandma and Aunt Delta. Another day, he was disappointed when he couldn't find a print of Star Wars for Lisa to watch again. Like any dad, he just wanted to make his daughter happy. Despite his worries about Lisa's safety, Elvis enjoyed the simple pleasures of being a father. However, his life was a mix of happiness and routine. He had to take a lot of different pills every day: uppers, downers, sleeping pills, and a strong painkiller called Dilaudid. Trish Henley, Dr. Nick's chief nurse, lived in a trailer house behind Graceland, just in case Elvis needed her. Even though Elvis was usually in a good mood when Lisa was around, his behavior could be unpredictable. He promised to take the kids and some adults to Libertyville and the old fairgrounds he loved, but then he changed his mind. Ginger, who was still young at heart, convinced him to keep his promise. He didn't want to disappoint the kids, so they went on the trip, staying up all night. As August dragged on, Elvis had his hair washed and dyed black to cover his white roots. Joe Esposito and the guys started gathering at Howard Johnson's Motor Lodge to prepare for the next tour, which was set to start on August 17th in Portland, Maine. Some of the guys suggested he let his hair return to its natural color, but Elvis insisted that his fans wanted to see the legendary Elvis. His moods were all over the place. One minute he was excited about adding new songs to the tour, and the next he was talking about proposing to Ginger on stage. When Ginger told him she wouldn't be with him at the start of the tour, he became miserable and asked for another girl to come along instead. Elvis was overweight, and his stage suits barely fit anymore. He didn't like being fat, but he didn't do much to change. A few days of a liquid diet and a short stint on an exercise bike weren't going to help much. Elvis's mind often returned to the book Elvis, What Happened. He told Ginger it was fictional, but he knew it wasn't. The book was a colorful but accurate account of his life. Despite what people in his circle thought, he knew he had a drug problem. He wore a DA jacket to show he wasn't a drug user, but he knew he was an addict. He just didn't realize how serious it was. Dr. Nick tried to control Elvis's drug use by sometimes giving him placebos, but Elvis wasn't fooled. He knew what his body needed and found ways to get the drugs he wanted from doctors in Memphis, Los Angeles, and Las Vegas. On August 15th, 1977, it was a wet and dull day in Memphis. Elvis started his day in the afternoon, as usual, playing with Lisa in the grounds. She was leaving for Los Angeles the next day, and he was set to start his tour. He wanted to watch the movie MacArthur again, but when no projectionist was available, he called his dentist for an appointment at 10:30 that night. Being Elvis, he could do that. Ginger, Charlie, and Billy went with him in his black Stutz Blackhawk. Elvis drove, with 2 handguns tucked in his belt. He was in a good mood, offering the dentist a ride to California on the Lisa Marie. He got some cavities filled, and his and Ginger's teeth cleaned, and picked up a prescription for codeine. Back at Graceland, Elvis checked on the tour arrangements, and asked to see the new religious books Larry had brought from Los Angeles. He was interested in a book about the Shroud of Turin. He hoped Ginger would join him on tour, but when she said she was on her period, he was disappointed and upset. Elvis called Dr. Nick at around 2:15 a.m., complaining that one of his filled teeth was bothering him. Dr. Nick prescribed 6 Dilaudid tablets. Ricky Stanley, Elvis's stepbrother, went to the hospital pharmacy to get the pills. Later, Elvis and Ginger chatted until around 4 a.m. Then he woke Billy and Joe, asking them to play racquetball. They didn't play for long, and after a short session on his exercise bike, Elvis sat at the piano and sang Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain. Billy washed and dried his hair, and Ricky brought a packet of pills, mainly depressants and placebos, to help Elvis sleep. The pills didn't work. Elvis was restless and had to fly to Maine that afternoon. He needed to get some rest. At around 8 a.m., he asked for a second packet of pills. When those didn't work, he called for a third packet of drugs, which Aunt Delta gave him. Elvis told Ginger he was going to read in the bathroom. "Don't fall asleep," Ginger said. "Okay, I won't," he replied, smiling as he closed the door. Around 1:30 p.m., Ginger woke up and couldn't find Elvis. She called her mother and then went to the bathroom. When she didn't get an answer, she pushed the door open and found Elvis face down on the red shag carpet. A book about sex and psychic energy lay nearby. Ginger was breathless and sobbing when she called the maid, Nancy, who ran upstairs and then down to tell Al Strada, who was checking Elvis's stage suits. Joe Esposito and Vernon Presley rushed upstairs, and Joe tried to give Elvis artificial respiration. Elvis's face was swollen and purple, and he had been sick on the carpet. The ambulance arrived quickly, and Dr. Nick joined them in the back. "Breathe, Presley. Come on, breathe," he pleaded, but it was too late. Elvis had been dead for hours. Back at Graceland, Joe made the necessary calls. The first was to Colonel Parker, who was in Portland preparing for the tour. The second was to Priscilla in California. She was worried about Lisa, but Joe reassured her that the child was being taken care of. The hospital administrator announced Elvis's death to the press. At Graceland, Aunt Delta and Nancy Rooks cleared Elvis's private rooms of any drugs or drug paraphernalia. When the police arrived, there was nothing in the bathroom medicine cabinet. Only 2 empty syringes were missed in the cleanup. An autopsy was started, but before it was completed, the chief medical examiner announced that Elvis died of a heart attack. The hospital's pathologists knew it was more complicated. Elvis's heart was enlarged, his arteries and veins were corroded, and his liver and large intestine were damaged. His blood and stomach tested positive for 14 drugs, 10 of which were in toxic quantities. Elvis's death was a shock, but it wasn't a surprise to those close to him. They had seen the signs and knew he was in trouble. Vernon insisted on having the funeral at Graceland, and he allowed fans to file past Elvis's body to pay their respects. Thousands waited in the August heat, and many were disappointed when the gates had to be closed after 3.5 hours. The day Elvis Presley passed away, the city of Memphis felt the weight of a great loss. Flags on all public buildings were lowered to half-mast, and messages of condolence poured in from all over the world. President Jimmy Carter, who had spoken to Elvis just a few months earlier, said that Elvis's death deprives our country of a part of itself, adding that Elvis had been unique and irreplaceable. The funeral was held on August 18th, in the living room at Graceland. It wasn't a big star affair, because Elvis had never really been part of that world. Before the ceremony, Priscilla, Lisa, and Aunt Delta gathered in Grandma's room at the back of the house as family and friends arrived. Linda Thompson, Ginger, Kathy Westmoreland, and Anne Margaret, along with her husband Roger Smith, were there. The governor of Tennessee, Raymond Blanton, guitarist Chet Atkins, and several RCA Records executives also came. Rex Humbard, a TV evangelist who had recently prayed with Elvis in his Las Vegas dressing room, gave a short sermon. He led everyone in singing Danny Boy and other hymns, including How Great Thou Art. James Blackwood and Kathy Westmoreland, dressed in white as she had promised, sang other hymns. The people who had been closest to Elvis Joe Esposito, Lamar Fike, George Klein, Jerry Schilling, Charlie Hodge, and cousins Billy and Gene Smith, along with Dr. Nick, were the pallbearers. The Graceland staff watched from a doorway. Red and Sonny West and Dave Hebler, who had been part of Elvis's life for a long time, weren't invited. For Red, it must have been one of the most painful days of his life. Colonel Tom Parker was there, too. He stood in the hall watching, wearing a patterned, short-sleeved blue shirt, no tie, crumpled baggy trousers, and a baseball cap. He looked out of place among all the dark suits. Maybe he didn't know how to show his grief. He had been busy, though, and brought some contracts for Vernon to sign. These contracts gave control of all Elvis Presley merchandising to a company called Factors Etc., from which the Colonel would get a slightly larger royalty than the Elvis estate. A few days later, Vernon signed. After the ceremony, Elvis's coffin was placed in a white hearse, and a procession of 17 white limousines carrying the mourners drove 3 miles past thousands of silent fans to a mausoleum at Forest Hill Cemetery. All the flowers sent that day were given to the fans. The headline on the front page of the Memphis Press-Scimitar captured the moment perfectly. A lonely life ends on Elvis Presley Boulevard. Elvis had always worried about money. Even though he had made hundreds of millions of dollars during his career, his total worth was estimated to be less than $10 million when he died. His home, cars, and airplanes were included, but his spending habits and the financial obligations he had to his family and staff meant that his wealth wouldn't have lasted long if he had stopped touring. For comparison, John Lennon, who was murdered just over 3 years later, left over $150 million. But Lennon's finances were managed by his wife Yoko Ono, the daughter of a Japanese banker. Elvis's money was managed by his self-educated father, Vernon, and Colonel Tom Parker. Elvis had also worried that he would be forgotten after his death, but the opposite happened. He has been more honored and respected in death than he ever was in life. In 1977, there was an immediate surge in record sales, but the interest in him has only grown since then. His total record sales are now estimated to be over $1 billion. RCA, which bought his back catalog from him in 1973, made a very smart move. They repackaged his recordings in different themes like 50s, 60s, 70s, blues, country, rock, movies, religious, romance, and ballads. They even released outtakes of his recordings, and in 2016, a new album called If I Can Dream featuring his voice backed by the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, sold over 1 million copies. When Elvis died, many musicians were deeply affected. Some wrote songs about him, and critics who had dismissed his music started to appreciate it. Bruce Springsteen, a big fan, had written a song called Fire that he hoped Elvis would hear. He never knew if it reached Graceland, but it became a hit for the Pointer Sisters the next year. Elvis might not have understood why he sang the way he did, but those who followed him knew he was unique and inspiring. The 60s movies that Elvis had made, which he didn't like, played on TV for years, but people seem to have forgotten about them. Today, films like Spin Out and Fun in Acapulco might as well have never been made. But nothing can stop the popularity of songs like Suspicious Minds and Don't Be Cruel. Elvis's looks have also helped keep his memory alive. His image as a young man appeared on U.S. mail postage stamps in 1992, and again in 2015. Graceland has been turned into a tourist attraction, and his music has been used in movies like Ocean's 11 and Men in Black, as well as in commercials for phones, supermarkets, and sportswear. But the real reason he remains so popular is his voice. He used different styles for different songs, and his voice could go from bass to baritone to tenor to falsetto in the same song. He sang with such emotion that millions of people, whether they spoke English or not, could connect with him. Elvis wasn't a trained singer, but he listened and learned. When he sang, it was as if he truly believed in the feelings he was expressing. That was his gift and his appeal. He could communicate in song like very few others. Bob Dylan said it best, hearing Elvis for the first time was like busting out of jail. I thank God for Elvis Presley. After Elvis died, his daughter Lisa Marie became the sole heir to his estate. She has had a career as a singer and songwriter, been married 4 times, and has 4 children. She is the chairperson of the Elvis Presley Charitable Foundation and has been living mainly in Sussex, England, with her 4th husband, music producer Michael Lockwood, and their twin girls. Her mother, Priscilla Presley, agreed to open Graceland as a tourist attraction in 1982. It has been very successful and is now the 2nd most visited home in the USA, after the White House, with 500,000 visitors a year. Priscilla was also an actress for 15 years, appearing in TV shows like Dallas and the Naked Gun movie. She has since appeared in Christmas pantomimes in the UK and has a son, Navarone, from her relationship with Italian screenwriter Marco Garibaldi. Vernon Presley separated from his 2nd wife Dee Stanley and set up home with nurse Sandy Miller. They divorced in 1977, and Vernon died in 1979. Elvis's grandmother died in 1980, and his Aunt Delta lived on at Graceland until her death in 1993. Colonel Tom Parker was revealed to be an illegal immigrant from Holland named Andreas Cornelius van Kuijk. He didn't have a passport, which is why he never allowed Elvis to tour abroad. After Elvis's death, he set up a deal with Factors, etc., to control memorabilia, but a court later investigated his management of Elvis's career. His connection with the Elvis Presley estate was terminated in 1983. He continued to live in a suite at the Las Vegas Hilton, but was evicted in 1984. He married his secretary, Lone Miller, after his first wife died in 1986. Despite earning millions during his management of Elvis, his estate was valued at just $1 million when he died of a heart attack in 1990. Lamar Fike, one of Elvis's close friends, said that Elvis's death ruined everyone's life. He tried running a van conversion plant in Waco, Texas, but it went bankrupt. He then returned to Nashville to work in the music business. He died in 2011. Red West, after being cut off by Vernon, made a new career in Hollywood as a stuntman and actor. Sonny West raised Arabian horses for a while in California, but later moved to Nashville to work as a road manager and became a born-again Christian. George Klein continued to work as a disc jockey and for Elvis Presley Enterprises. Charlie Hodge, who lived in a basement apartment at Graceland for 17 years, was asked to leave by Vernon in 1978. He later toured the world talking about Elvis and died in 2005. Billy Smith, the son of Uncle Travis, who minded the gates, continued working at Graceland for several months. When he and his wife wanted to take the trailer home Elvis had given them, Vernon told them it didn't belong to them. Later, Billy worked as a guide at Graceland but was eventually fired. He has since worked as a machine specialist. Jerry Schilling, who had already started a second career as a film editor, worked in TV and became the head of creative affairs at Graceland. He also managed Lisa Marie Presley for a while. Larry Geller, the spiritual advisor who annoyed the Colonel, has spent much of his life writing and speaking about Elvis. Joe Esposito, who was the chief organizer between the Colonel and Elvis, later worked as a road manager for Michael Jackson, the Bee Gees, Karen Carpenter, and John Denver. He also wrote several books on Elvis and died in 2016. Sam Phillips, who first recorded Elvis, Carl Perkins, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Johnny Cash, sold Sun Records in 1968 and invested in radio stations. He is remembered as a pioneer in rock music and died in 2003. Dr. George Nishapoulos, who prescribed many pills to Elvis, had his medical license permanently revoked in 1995 for overprescribing to numerous patients. He later worked evaluating medical insurance claims and died in 2016. Scotty Moore, one of the most influential guitarists in rock history, had to end his career in his 60s due to arthritis. He died in 2016. Elvis Presley's music remains a testament to his unique talent and enduring legacy. His recordings span a wide range of styles, from straight pop to rock and roll, country, blues, spirituals, hymns, and R&B songs. His voice, with its ability to convey deep emotion, is what keeps his memory alive and his music timeless. Elvis's life was a whirlwind of music, love, and challenges. As he rose to fame, the pressures of stardom began to shape his world in ways he never imagined. When Elvis first joined RCA, he was nervous but excited. The company was huge, and they had big plans for him. He knew he had to prove himself. One of the first songs he recorded with RCA was Heartbreak Hotel. When he first heard it, he was thrilled, exclaiming, "Hot dog me, play it again," to Me Axton, who had written the song. It became a massive hit, launching him into the stratosphere of fame, but not everyone was a fan. Critics called Heartbreak Hotel a morbid, melodramatic mess, and Elvis faced harsh criticism. Despite the criticism, he stayed true to his music. He performed on the CBS TV show, Stage Show, and the audience loved him. Bill Randall introduced him saying, "We think tonight he's going to make television history for you. Ladies and gentlemen, Elvis Presley." As his fame grew, so did the scrutiny. Elvis struggled with the pressure. He confided in Colonel Parker, his manager, saying, "I know right from wrong, but it's so easy to get into trouble. You can get trapped into something maybe you didn't think to do." He was aware of the traps of fame and tried to stay grounded. Elvis's performances were often met with mixed reactions. Some people loved his energy and style, while others were shocked by his movements on stage. He was dubbed Elvis the Pelvis by the media, and he found it frustrating. "That seems to me the most stupid thing an adult person can say," he told a TV Guide reporter. He believed that music was a healthy thing, and that people didn't need to be doped up to enjoy it. Despite the criticism, Elvis's music continued to resonate with people. He often talked about how much he was influenced by black musicians and gospel music. "The colored folks have been singing and playing it just like I do now, man, for more years than I know," he told a reporter. He was proud of his roots and the music that shaped him. Elvis's life was not just about music. He also faced personal challenges. When he flew to Nashville for a show, he had a scare. The plane hit turbulence and he was terrified. He later told a reporter, "I thought I was going to die. It was the scariest moment of my life." But he kept going, driven by his love for music and his fans. On stage, Elvis was a different person. He joked and interacted with the audience, making them feel special. One night he said, "Get out of the stable, Grandma. You're too old to be horsing around," and the crowd roared with laughter. He knew how to connect with people and make them feel alive. Elvis's fame also brought him new opportunities. He started making movies, but he found the transition challenging. "I was totally green about movie production," he admitted on stage in Las Vegas. His first movie, Love Me Tender, received mixed reviews. Some critics were harsh, calling him a 172-pound, 6-foot-tall sausage. But Elvis tried to stay positive, saying, "It makes me feel bad coming back here like this to remember how poor we was." He was grateful for his success, but always remembered his humble beginnings. As Elvis's career took off, he faced new challenges and pressures. But he never lost his passion for music and his love for his fans. He continued to perform, to create, and to inspire, leaving a legacy that would endure for generations to come. Elvis's life was a mix of high and low moments, and the more people around him tried to understand, the more complex it seemed. When he talked about his mother, Gladys, to a Memphis reporter, he shared his deepest feelings. "I don't believe that death is the end. I just don't," he said, showing a side of him that was deeply rooted in his faith and love for his family. Gordon Stoker of the Jordanaires, who worked closely with Elvis, was often surprised by his talent. "We were all surprised. We knew he could sing, but we didn't know he could sing that well." Gordon said after making the record, "It's now or never" with Elvis. This song became one of Elvis's most beloved hits, and it showed just how much he could connect with his audience. Elvis's time in Hollywood was a mix of frustration and acceptance. He once told a reporter, "I didn't have any say-so in it all, so I did it like it was a job." He felt obligated to do things he didn't believe in, and it often left him feeling trapped. "What am I supposed to do with this piece of shit?" he once asked Gordon Stoker about one of the bad film songs he had to sing. Despite this, he still found moments of joy, saying, "Not all the films were bad, some were quite funny, entertaining." Elvis's relationship with his father, Vernon, and his stepmother, Dee, was also a source of tension. "He's all I've got left in the world. I'll never go against him or stand in his way," Elvis told a reporter from the Memphis Press-Scimitar. But he wasn't always happy with Dee, and he made it clear to his staff that he wasn't happy with her trying to take over Graceland. When it came to his music, Elvis was always true to his roots. "Rock and roll is basically just gospel music, or gospel music mixed with rhythm and blues. Gospel music is the purest thing on this earth," he often explained. This love for gospel music was a constant in his life, even as he became a global icon. Elvis's personal life was also complicated. His relationship with Priscilla was intense and sometimes difficult. "I was ready, he wasn't," Priscilla wrote in her book, Elvis and Me. Elvis was often protective and controlling, telling her, "Don't tell me how to do my job." But he also had moments of vulnerability, like when he said, "I felt obligated to do things I didn't believe in. I was locked in." Even with all the fame and success, Elvis never forgot where he came from. "I think of Mother nearly every single day. If I never do anything really wrong, it's all because of her. She wouldn't let me do anything wrong," he told a reporter. This sense of responsibility and love for his mother stayed with him throughout his life. Elvis's time in the Army and his return to the stage were pivotal moments. He once said, "The Army makes men out of boys." This experience seemed to shape him in ways that even his music couldn't. When he returned to performing, he was determined to do things his way. "I'm never going to sing another song I don't believe in, and I'm never going to make another picture I don't believe in," he told Steve Binder, who directed one of his famous TV specials. Elvis's life was a series of ups and downs, but through it all, he remained a complex and deeply human figure. His music, his relationships, and his struggles all contributed to the legend that is Elvis Presley. Elvis's life ended on a somber note. On August 16, 1977, he was found dead in his bathroom at Graceland, his home in Memphis. He was only 42 years old. The official cause of death was a heart attack, but many believed it was a result of his long struggle with prescription drug addiction. The news of his death spread quickly, and fans from all over the world came to Graceland to pay their respects. The outpouring of grief was immense, and it was clear that Elvis had touched the lives of millions. His funeral was a solemn event, with close friends and family saying their goodbyes. Priscilla, his ex-wife, and their daughter, Lisa Marie, were among those who mourned deeply. In the days leading up to his death, Elvis had been performing on tour, showing signs of declining health and energy. His final performance was in Indianapolis on June 26, 1977, where he struggled through the show. Despite his condition, he continued to work, driven by a deep love for his fans and a desire to keep performing. Elvis's legacy lives on through his music, his films, and the memories of those who knew him. His fans, known as Elvis Presley fans or Elvis fans, continue to celebrate his life and career. Graceland, now a museum, attracts visitors from around the world who want to experience a piece of Elvis's world. In the years following his death, many books and documentaries have been made about Elvis, exploring different aspects of his life and career. Some focus on his early days as a rising star, others on his time in Hollywood, and still others on his final years. Each offers a glimpse into the complex and often contradictory life of a man who became a global icon. Elvis's impact on music and popular culture is undeniable. He revolutionized rock and roll and influenced countless artists. His voice, his style, and his charisma continue to inspire new generations. Despite the tragedies and challenges he faced, Elvis remains a symbol of the American dream and the power of music to bring people together. President Jimmy Carter recognized this when he said, "Elvis Presley's death deprives our country of a part of itself." It was a fitting tribute to a man who had left an indelible mark on the world. Even decades after his passing, Elvis's spirit and music continue to live on, reminding us of the magic he brought to the world.